former CIA director under President Obama, who now serves as MSNBC's senior national security and intelligence analyst. Director Brennan, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Good morning, Holly.
Let me get your thoughts now on the way that the White House and specifically the president has responded to the death of this long-serving Senator John McCain.
Well, I'm glad that they finally came out and acknowledged the tremendous contributions that Senator McCain has made to this country. And so I think we all should honor the McCain family request, is to keep this focus on the senator and celebrate his life, celebrate his patriotism and his courage. And I think that's what we all should do. And I'm glad to see that finally the White House came around and acknowledged that tremendous, tremendous work of John McCain.
Were you surprised by Senator Graham, though, this morning? You saw that soundbite that Garrett Haake played for us where he said, hey, if the president does what the president wants to do, seem to give a president the pass on this, seem unbothered by this.
Well, Lindsey Graham is probably the closest person in the U.S. Congress to Senator McCain. The two of them had great mutual respect and even love for one another. They didn't always agree, they didn't see eye to eye, and they had different approaches on issues. And I think this demonstrates a different approach. Senator McCain would call it the way he sees it. And in fact, he criticized himself whenever he was being politically expedient. And sometimes I think Lindsey Graham takes the politically expedient route. But that doesn't mean that he is in any way making light of any of the things that Senator McCain has done or said or stood for. Senator McCain was an exceptionally principled individual. My last engagement with him, it was a very contentious one where he hurled some profanities at me over some differences in policy. And even though it was quite heated, I had the greatest respect for Senator McCain because he was a principled individual. Stubborn, feisty, yes, but principled, patriotic, courageous, somebody who loved this country above all else. And I think, as Senator Graham said, it is country before self. And I think that's what Senator McCain's life really embodied.
That's such an interesting anecdote because I was going to ask you, you did have policy differences with John McCain. I think Gina Haspel, for example, just to pick a recent example of this. What was this recent fight that you guys had? What was it over? What policy?
We were talking about things that were going on in the Middle East, specifically Syria. And Senator McCain wanted to bring that conflict to a halt, but also wanted to make sure the United States was able to demonstrate its great influence and might and do what we could to try to bring that conflict to an end.
You referenced that Senator McCain did sometimes pay a political price for being a kind of straight talker. Does that sound familiar to you, somebody who has sometimes paid a political price for being a straight talker? So with McCain gone, who replaces him as the person on Capitol Hill who is a Republican who can serve as a check on the president, or at least the voice of a check on the president?
That's a great question. And we see that Senators Flake and Corker have spoken out, but they are leaving the Senate. Right. I'd like to think that there are going to be senators now who are going to be thinking about Senator McCain's legacy and what he stood for, and to adopt some of the very same principled positions and speak truth to power. It's not just the intelligence community. It needs to be members of the Congress who are going to speak truth to power, especially in this White House today. Here's
what Senator Graham said this morning about the final words McCain had for him as he was convalescing in Arizona.
He had a romantic view of our nation to his last breath, and literally almost the last thing he said to me was, "I love you. I have not been cheated." He was not cheated.
John McCain was not cheated. His life was one great example of what a lifetime of service means, and I think we should all look up to him as a very shining example of what an American it can be.
I want to move on to one more topic, but before I do, let me just make clear here, you've been somebody who has not been afraid, obviously, to criticize this president, but what I'm hearing from you in this discussion is that you're not going to criticize the president for how he responded to the death of John McCain.
Right now, I'm going to celebrate John McCain's life.
Okay. Let me ask you about something else that's happening on Capitol Hill. Bruce Ohr is appearing behind closed doors. He, of course, is this DOJ official. The president has threatened to strip his security clearance. Obviously, your security clearance has already been stripped. You are not a current official. You're a former official. Bruce Ohr is not.
Yeah.
Let me play what Mark Meadows had to say just a couple of seconds ago on the Hill regarding this closed-door meetings, because this is something that conservatives in particular have really seized on. Watch. Yeah.
Based on what I've seen, unless Bruce Ohr was instructed to do what he did, then certainly he should be fired, because it means that not only was he coordinating with Christopher Steele, who had been terminated by the FBI, but coordinating with him multiple times after that termination.
Or, of course, part of referencing his work on the Russia investigation, et cetera, Director.
It's my understanding that everything that Bruce Ohr did was approved and known to senior Department of Justice officials, coordinated closely with the FBI. So I think this is something that, will have to be looked at. I don't know all the facts here, but I think some of the facts that are being purported by some members of Congress may not, in fact, be the actual facts.
President Trump threatened to strip your security clearance, and then he did. President Trump has threatened to strip Bruce Ohr's security clearance. What happens next?
I don't know. The only thing I've heard about my security clearances from the government is when Sarah Huckabee Sanders said at the podium that my clearance has been stripped. I have not been contacted by anybody at all, either before or since then. So whether or not my clearances have been stripped, I'm still, uncertain about. But she said it. She read something from Donald Trump, but yeah.
What would the process be? Would you normally hear from some sort of intelligence official saying, hey, FYI?
I would think that would be the process, but in this current administration, process seems to be thrown out the door, because the process for a revocation of clearance has very clear guidelines, and so the Trump administration did not follow the guidelines that they, in fact, affirmed last year about how to deal with security clearance revocations.
Do you think they're walking it back? Do you think they're going to give it up and let you keep your clearance?
Well, given that I think everybody believes that the rationale for stripping me of my clearances is bogus, I'm sure there are some people who are scratching their head right now who are, maybe have to put together the memorandum to say why I was stripped of my clearances, other than the fact that Mr. Trump might not like me, which is not a valid reason. So I'm still waiting to hear. They have my contact information, but I have not yet heard yet.
To be continued, Director. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks,
and for
Allie.
sharing your thoughts and memories of John McCain as well. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.